So as mentioned in the previous video, McDonald's, it was introduced in France in 1972. Not a lot of French people, at least a lot of French cultural elites were not happy about it, but many French people actually enjoyed McDonald's, and it became one of the fastest growing branches in Europe. If French diet was changing in the 1970s in France, so was the political scene. Especially the Communist Party under Georges Marchais. I mentioned he became leader in the early 1970s. He was increasingly moving the Communist Party towards relatively speaking, moderate political position. In fact, especially in working with the Parti Socialiste in trying to create a new popular front kind of joint effort of the French left to actually take power. He went as far in the mid-1970s as saying that the old dictatorship of the proletariat, in which the working classes would overthrow capitalism and establish a new communist utopia, that was actually unnecessary. That, in other words, maybe a communist dictatorship, dictatorship of the proletariat, as had been the traditional idea of the French Communist Party and communism in general in the 20th century, that was no longer necessary, and it was kind of pushing, in some ways, the Communist Party closer to the Socialist Party in terms of its, or the Parti Socialiste, in terms of its political policies. And this would have been important because 1978 was an election year. France was due to hold elections, legislative elections, and it looked like the possibility of a combined Socialist and Communist Party effort might lead to the installation of a left-wing prime minister, a left-wing government, although the president, of course, would still remain Giscard d'Estaing. But as time went on, Marchais came to realise that by mimicking the Socialist Party, in some ways he was giving permission for his own supporters to migrate their support for the Socialist Party. So in 1977, Marchais pulled the plug on the kind of alliance with the Parti Socialiste, so the two left-wing parties split. And from the point of view of left-wing politics in France, this was a pity because 1978 represented an opportunity to capitalise on the growing political chaos on the French right, especially as a variety of French politicians kind of fought over the legacy of Charles de Gaulle, or what we call the Gaullist movement in French society. So I actually want to take a step back in time to 1974. We talked about the presidential election in 1974, but I want to give us a little more context to understand the growing split that is emerging in the French right. I talked about the Baron system. The Baron system was essentially in the kind of Gaullist party, that is the Union of Democrats for the Republic, was dominated by those who had served their time. If you want to advance in that party, you were expected to work your way up the ladder, and when you had been around long enough, when you were loyal enough, then you could be put in a position such as president or prime minister or one of the top positions. And in 1974, the Barons decided that the next man up to be president was Jacques Chaban-Delmas, who we've already seen, who had been Pompidou's prime minister before his death. But there was some people within the Gaullist movement, within the Union of Democrats for the Republic, who disagreed. And nothing particularly, the problem wasn't so much with Delmas as a person. The problem was with the Baron system. The idea is that if you want to be a leader in the party, you have to stick around long enough to work your way up. And these people became known as the Young Wolves. So here we have an image of Young Wolves here. The Young Wolves essentially were Gaullists who wanted to overthrow the Baron system, and basically as a way of advancing their own political careers, i.e. I don't want to wait around 20 years to become president or leader of the party. I'm willing to kind of break up that Baron system in order to help my own political career accelerate more quickly. And the most famous of the Young Wolves was Jacques Chirac. So in the presidential election between Chaban-Delmas and Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, Chirac and 42 other Young Wolves basically signed a document publicly supporting Giscard d'Estaing over the Baron's choice, Chaban-Delmas. And they were considered kind of traitors by many in the Gaullist movement for having broken ranks and overthrown the kind of system of loyalty that already existed. But Chirac himself was personally rewarded by being made Prime Minister in 1976. Prime Minister in 1974, and he was to remain Prime Minister for 2 years. Chirac himself stepped down as Prime Minister, or was pushed down. He himself felt Giscard d'Estaing didn't really take him all that seriously, didn't kind of value his input, whereas Giscard d'Estaing by this stage wanted to kind of change government So it looked like he was taking the economic concerns of many French people more seriously, and replaced Chirac with Barré. So Chirac himself, by this stage, had taken control of the Union of Democrats for the Republic, that is the old Gaullist party. And he decided to rebrand it in the bear with me just 1 second. He decided to rebrand the party in 1976 as La Rassemblée pour la République, the Rally for the People, or for the Rally for the Republic, excuse me. And essentially what he was doing, he was kind of shifting away. So Charles de Gaulle, when we talk about Gaullism, Charles de Gaulle was a supporter of, or he had won support amongst many people in the centre, and indeed some people on the French left as well. Chirac is reimagining that party as a strictly more conservative, more traditionally conservative party that's kind of shedding some of the policies that would have appealed to left-wing voters, or at least centrist voters, and is now marking itself strictly as a more conservative political party. And as a growing sign of the political rift that was emerging with Giscard d'Estaing, I mentioned one of the reforms that the new president has introduced, Giscard d'Estaing, in the 1970s, was giving France the ability to elect its own mayor. In 1977, the first mayoral election was held in Paris in a long, long time, going back to the 19th century. Giscard d'Estaing had picked his own candidate, his friend Michel Dornan, and Chirac decided to run against him. And not only did Chirac run against him, but he actually won the election. And was to serve, as you can see here, serve as mayor of Paris for the next almost 20 or over 20 years. Almost 20 years. Giscard d'Estaing and Raymond Barré kind of realised now that Chirac was taking up much of the institutional political support on the right, and was clearly going in a different direction from d'Estaing's own approach. So therefore, Giscard d'Estaing and Barré had created a new political party, the Union pour la Démocratie Française, the Union for Democratic France, which was to stand in contrast from Chirac's Rally for the Republic. The three main differences between the parties, and kind of recognizing this the division in the French right, were Chirac's party was more kind of traditionally Gaullist, which meant that it supported strong government intervention in the economy. It supported a strong centralized government that kind of disavowed giving much political power to local governments, and it insisted on maintaining France's kind of independence on the international scene as best it could. Giscard d'Estaing's Union for Democratic France differed in that it supported free market economics, free market policies, little government interference in the economy, more local government, and greater collaboration with France's allies, and particularly the United States and the other members of the European Economic Community. And so the result is that by the late 1970s, the French right resembles the French political left, in that the wing is divided into two factions, two different political parties, each with even though they have more in common than their opponents on the other side of the political spectrum, have significant policy differences themselves and attract different supporters. So the point I was making earlier on is that the French left had an opportunity, because the French right itself was divided in 1978, but by not working together, they allowed the various parties on the French right to kind of form or to win the election in 1978. So here's the result of the election. So the presidential majority party, that is the broadly speaking, the right-wing parties have a majority, 287. To the left-wing parties, only win 200. But of course, you'll notice that it's Chirac's Rally for the Republic actually wins more votes than the Union for French Democracy. And the result of this is that it's becoming kind of apparent that when the next presidential election takes place, it's due to take place in 1981, Giscard d'Estaing is going to face a challenge from Chirac and the right. And possibly that will leave the door open for forces on the left to kind of wedge themselves in and possibly take the office of president for the first time. And Chirac himself did nothing to kind of discourage this view. He had actually been in a car accident in 1979 and was in the hospital at Cauchin in Paris. When actually he was there as elections were being held for the new European Parliament. I mentioned earlier on that the French government had agreed to allow or to support a democratically elected European Parliament for the European Economic Community. Chirac, as a traditional Gaullist, did not like this idea, this growing kind of federalization in Europe, kind of contrasted with the kind of typical Gaullist independence we associate with Charles de Gaulle and his supporters. And so from hospital in 1979, he issues a statement talking about the upcoming elections and basically telling French people that this is a bad development, that people who support these policies are always trying to weaken France, are always hating on France, that essentially they are the party of the foreigners. And while he didn't specifically mention Giscard d'Estaing in that statement, it was very clear that it was a defiant challenge to the president, a rejection of many of the president's policies, and a sign that when an election was going to be held in 1981, Chirac was not going to respect Giscard d'Estaing's position as the incumbent president, representing the French right, and in fact was going to make a play himself to try and win the presidency from Giscard d'Estaing and to place it in the more traditional hands the hands of a more traditional Gaullist such as Chirac himself.